Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Members Question and Answer. Today we're answering comments and questions from our channel members on Frontline and other videos on current conflicts and their impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram, a former senior British military intelligence officer and now commentator on all matters geopolitics, security, counter-terrorism, cyber and anything else. And oh boy, has it been a quiet week or not. There's a lot going on and a lot for us to get through, I think. But it's your questions that are important. Remember, if you've signed up, you can put them in. We'll answer them and take them on. Our first question today comes from Bojack, who asks, do you think Trump has only got good intentions of ending the war in Ukraine, or do you believe he is just sending out more propaganda for Russia? Well, Bojack, there's so much in that question. We have to remember that Donald Trump promised the US electorate that he would stop the war on day one of him being inaugurated. He hasn't done that. That day one very quickly shifted to day 100. And we're recording this on Thursday. It's day 45 of Trump's presidency. And he is desperate to try and achieve something. And in achieving something, he approaches things from a business perspective, from a bullying business perspective. That's how he works. He doesn't work from a diplomatic perspective. And this is why we're seeing him tying any deal. He keeps talking about a deal, a deal, a deal. And that's a business deal. And the business deal is tying into Ukrainian access or access to Ukrainian rare earth metals. If he can get that deal, he can turn to the American people and say, hey, I've got investment for US taxpayers' dollars. And that's why he's forcing that hand. But what Trump is doing is everything in a rapid time frame, and he is causing fissures across the geopolitical world. And this is where Putin is a past master at exploiting the fissures that he can get and will wiggle his way into them and to try and make those fissures bigger and turn them into cracks and try and turn them into fractures in what's going on. And I think that's what we're seeing from a Russian perspective. Trump has got a very junior, inexperienced team around him at the top table. Putin has got a very experienced team around him with Lavrov and Peskov and the others that are advising him. And Putin's been at this for a long, long time. So I think what we're seeing is Trump's desire to end the war. And I think it's an altruistic, and he's got this real desire to stop the killing, to stop the number of people that are dying. But his approach is like cracking an egg, but he's not just using a sledgehammer. He's using, a power-driven Thor hammer to try and do it, and isn't looking at the second and third order consequences of what could happen. Putin is seeing what's going on, and I don't think Putin can believe exactly what's happening. He is suddenly going from a position where, and I will justify this, Putin is losing the war. Not on the front line, not with the movements at the tactical level, but at the operational level, his economy is just about to fall apart. His ability to continue to prosecute the conflict is being affected dramatically. But now Putin thinks he can win. And his definition of winning is not just getting the territory that he holds at the moment, but getting the whole of the Donbass. And he thinks he can force Donald Trump to do that. And we're not going to see any movement from Putin. Trump, I suspect, has been negotiating with Putin behind closed doors and is not getting the messages that he wants from Putin, which is why potentially we saw Zelensky being set up as a fall guy in the Oval Office last Friday so that Trump can turn around to the electorate and say, hey, I know I promised that I'd end this war on day one or then delay to day 100, but it's not my fault, it's Zelensky's fault. He doesn't want to upset Putin in what he's doing. So it's a bit of both, I think, answering your question, Bojack. He does want to end the war, but he's also sending out a lot of pro-Russian propaganda and is playing into Putin's hands. Or is Putin playing Trump in like the master that he is? A rhetorical question back to you. Simon asks, why do you think Trump hasn't put any pressure on Putin to give anything up? Well, I think behind closed doors, Trump has probably put quite a bit of pressure on Putin, but I don't think he's got the same levers that he has on Zelensky, or we haven't seen those levers yet. I think it'll come to a point where Trump either has to play his hand completely, and Zelensky in the Oval Office said, we're not playing cards, but the cards analogy works out here. His hand will be called and he'll have to lay it down. And laying it down, we'll then understand whether he is backing Putin or whether he's going to back Zelensky. And I think when Trump's hand of cards goes down on the table, if he's backing Putin, then it's clear that Putin has some degree of hold over Donald Trump. The world order of America and Russia coming closer together is against any logic that that's out there. There are some minor issues that could be taken into account with regard to trying to stop Russia or the Russian Federation collapsing completely. But if it comes down on Zelensky's side, we could see a very rapid reversal of the US withdrawal of support for the Ukrainians and Trump turning around and saying, I have to send Putin a strong message and say, we've tried to get Zelensky to compromise, he's compromised, you haven't, we're going to have to force your hand to compromise. We're still some time off this. All of this could change by Donald Trump's tweet tomorrow morning or the day after. There's real difficulty in trying to predict what's going through his head or the minds of any of his advisors. David asks, do you think Putin can only survive if Russia is constantly at war? Very interesting point, David, because under Putin's regime, he's almost been constantly at war. Whether you're talking down the Caucasus in Georgia, or whether you're talking now up into Europe, into Ukraine, Putin. I think if there wasn't a war, Putin would still be surviving. But what he'd be doing is he'd be causing as much disruption through access to Russian organized crime gangs and the way the oligarchs work. And work around the world. I think, if anything, what the conflict has done is it's restricted a lot of what Putin and his oligarchs have been able to make through their criminal networks, and therefore has been hurting him in that way. But Putin is an idealist from a Putin perspective. He wants to regenerate the old Soviet Union again, where Putin is the Tsar at the center of it. He's wanted to do that ever since the collapse of the Berlin Wall and his move from Russian intelligence services into politics. So I don't think he can only survive if Russia's at war, but I think he wants Russia in a continual state of conflict to try and regenerate the old Soviet Union again. And I can't see any way of him changing his mind. This has been part of Putin for so many years when he's been at the top. So Sunni asks, with Russia being at the weakest, do you think that if Trump military aid doesn't return, could Europe attack Russia successfully? Well, I don't think Europe has any intention of attacking Russia. The war at the moment is between Russia and Ukraine. Europe will continue to provide support and additional support to Ukraine, but the thought of Europe attacking Russia, that would be a declaration of war and would start World War III. So yes, Russia is at its weakest at the moment, and it wouldn't take much to push it over the edge economically and its ability to support its ongoing conflict inside Ukraine. Russia is very close to that collapsing. It's feeling as if it's been thrown a bit of a lifeline by what's coming out of Washington at the moment. How that lifeline is going to develop, we don't know. But no, Europe, I don't think, is going to attack Russia or has any intention of it. And even if it would cause the collapse of Russia, having worked with Europe and European governments and European militaries, trying to debate that and to get a decision on it would take years, absolute years. So it isn't going to happen. Kay then asks, do you think Trump was using American scare tactics to ensure Zelensky would sign the deal? Kay, I think, yes, 100%. Trump is a bully. He approaches things from a business perspective. If he bullies his way into business, he will force something, he'll threaten something to that level, knowing full well that he'll negotiate down to that level. And that's what we're seeing happening at the moment. And President Zelensky, it seems as if is now going to go back and sign a mineral deal with the United States. I fully expect that to happen. I hope Donald Trump then turns back on the aid and the intelligence support for Ukraine. And then Sue asks, finally, did Putin invade Ukraine as a distraction for failing domestic issues in Russia? Sue, again, a very valid point, and that was probably part of his motivation, but actually his underlying motivation, and he'll have put down the failing domestic issues in Russia to the fact that Russia is just a country. It is not seen as a superpower in the way that the USSR was whenever Putin was first joined the Russian or the Soviet intelligence agencies, and he wants to regenerate that again. He's got one puppet state that he's brought back in with Belarus. That doesn't allow him to generate an empire. He needs at least one other, if not more, to generate the old Russian Empire, the old Soviet Union back again. And that's where he saw Ukraine falling very quickly and allowing him to fulfill that and use that as a stepping stone to bring in other countries that were formerly part of the Soviet Union. He's failed. He's using the war at the moment as a distraction for failing domestic issues, and that's where we're seeing in the internal rhetoric inside Russia, where he's blaming NATO for everything and blaming the West for everything. That can only last for so long. If Trump hadn't thrown him a lifeline, then I think that argument would have run out very quickly, certainly through 2025. I think there's a lifeline there now, so what's going to happen next is almost anybody's guess. It's very difficult to assess because the situation is changing. The facts are being interpreted or pushed out in different ways, and there's new issues coming to the table. So we live in interesting times, and this is keeping me busy and commentating. But thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening. If you want to get your comments and questions across, please sign up for Times Radio membership. And it will give you access to exclusive content and, of course, to put questions that we can answer on your behalf. But I'm Philip Ingram. Thank you for listening today. Goodbye.